Welcome, and in this lesson, we're going to talk about how we can modify the Grub bootloader to point to different kernels. Now, because we're on a linuxacademy.com lab server and we don't have the menu, now if you recall, when you boot a physical device, the boot menu, you can choose from different kernels to boot from. Well, I can actually modify the different kernels that we boot from the command line on the Linux machine. So in order to do that, again, I need to be aware of what kernels I have on my system. I can do a yum list kernel, which will of course list available kernels and then also kernels installed on my system. Now, because that's in there, it automatically created an initramfs files. Or if it didn't, we could run the RHCSA command to generate that. However, when we installed our kernel, or updated version of our kernel, it automatically modified our bootloader in order to point to the new kernel. What if we want to change back to the default of the old one? Well, I can modify my bootloader by saying grub2-set-default. And I can specify the default, 0, 1, or 2, or however many kernels we have. Now, by default, 0 is going to be the most recent version. We could set it to 1, and I can hit return, and then I can reboot my machine, and then let's see which kernel is booted as the default. So I'm going to go ahead and log back into my system, start over working as the root user, and then we can do a uname-r. And you'll notice it's our older version. It's not our .299 version. So we can do a yum list kernel. And you'll notice here, it's the 123 version and not the 229 version. Now to set it back to the most recent version, we could do a grub2-set-default. We'll set it to 0, and then we can reboot our machine. We'll log back into the machine. I can do my uname-r, and we'll see that it is the latest version. And so that's how we can modify the bootloader in order to change which kernel is loaded by default. Now again, if we're inside of a physical machine, we have access to the menu where we can modify it with our arrows, with our keyboard. We can manually select to it. But we can change the default one we boot to on our system by using the grub2-set-default. So that concludes it for this lesson. Go ahead and complete this lesson.